Hey, my name's Steve, and we're going to talk today about playing the blues melodically. As you saw in the opening clip, I was playing a melodic style of blues over the B-flat major blues. And what we're going to do is modulate that down to the G blues, G major blues, which would include three chords: G7, C7, and D7. Now you can play pretty much any unaltered versions of those chords as you're playing the blues that you wanted to. If you wanted to play some more advanced chord forms, you could certainly do that. But I chose G major blues because even if you don't know bar chords, you can play big note chords like G7 here, C7, D7, and then back to G7. Now, if you don't know the form of the blues, it's very simple. You're going to play one measure of G7, one measure of C7, then back to two measures of G7, then two measures of C7, then two measures of G7, and then one measure of D7 down to one measure of C7, and then one measure of G7, and then one measure of D7. And that's the end of the blues, and it just cycles back to the beginning and starts over. So if you have a moment, just go ahead and sketch yourself out a little chord chart before we get started here. And we're going to start with how to play the blues melodic style. Now most guitarists tend to want to play the blues, and this is primarily like rock, and even some blues guitar players are, pretty much locked into a pentatonic kind of a prison, I call it, because it kind of limits your options. And there are some blues players out there who play very, very dirty, nasty pentatonic blues, but they also can venture off into a more melodic style. One of the players that comes to mind is Robben Ford. If you've ever heard Robben Ford play, he's a very great blues guitarist, but he's also very well versed in jazz, and he can then wander away from the pentatonic ideas and play some pretty cool stuff. So, like I said, most guitar players will play the blues, and they'll just play that pentatonic style. That's okay. I mean, that'll get you by. But one of the things you can do is learn, first of all, before you learn how to play the melodic style, the absolute first thing you need to do is learn all of your major scales. Preferably, if you want to just try this out, learn at least one or two. Maybe one major scale that starts with the root of the chord, or the root of the scale or the tonic of the scale on the sixth string, and then maybe learn one major scale form with the tonic note on the fifth string. So you'd have maybe like this one, two full octaves would be that, and then you'd have the C, maybe the C major, so you'd have at least two major scales, but preferably there are 6 full patterns that you'd want to learn on the guitar that are very useful, and you should learn all 6 of them. But at least to get started with this, learn at least 2 of them, and then come back to this lesson, because you're going to need to know those to be able to navigate through this lesson. But anyway, starting out with the first chord, the G7. Well, before we even talk about that, let's talk about popular music, like a lot of pop tunes and stuff that you hear on the radio. A lot of Western classical music, and then even pop music on the radio, is based on what's called diatonic chords. Diatonic chords meaning essentially chords that are within the context of one key. And in any one major key, you have seven notes that are in the major scale, and on top of each one of those notes, a chord is built. So You have the 1 chord, the 2 chord, the 3, the 4, the 5, the 6, and the 7th chord. And in the context of any key, those chord types stay the same. So you'll have the 1, the 4, and the 5 chord are always major, and the 5 chord is the dominant 7 chord of the key. And there's only one dominant 7 chord in every major key. And the 5th chord, the chord that's built on the 5th note, is the dominant 7 chord. And that's the one that we're primarily going to be concerned with in this lesson. You know, for future reference, the 1, the 4, the 5 are major, the 5 being dominant. The 2, the 3, and the 6 are minor. The 7th chord, which is the note built on the chord built on the 7th note, is going to be diminished. It's a diminished chord, which kind of sounds like this. So you've probably heard that before. Anyway, what we're concerned with today is the dominant 7, and usually in the context of most pop songs and any kind of that's in any one key, you're going to only have one dominant 7th chord. The blues is tricky though, because what they do is they take each chord, the 1 chord, the 4 chord, and the 5 chord, and they make them all dominant 7. Okay, so if you want to learn to play melodically within those chords, over each of those chords, you're essentially modulating into 3 different keys throughout the entire blues. The first chord is the G7, okay? So that's the 5th chord, or the 5th note. The G is the 5th note of the C major scale. So if you were to do C major, you'd go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a G, which is where the G7 is. So essentially when you're playing melodically over the G7, you want to be playing in the key of C major. However, you don't want to start and end on your C. You want to start and end in the scale, in the C major scale. You want to start and end on the G. That's the trick. And that's a mode of the C major scale. It's called the Mixolydian mode. And the Mixolydian mode is the mode that you want to learn to play over these dominant 7 chords. Eventually, we can get into, you know, arpeggios, which are very helpful to play over chords. But for right now, we're going to stick with scales and keep things kind of simple. So you've got your G7 chord. You're going to play C major. Now you see if I started on ending on C, it doesn't really fit the chord too well. It fits the chord better if you play the entire scale of C major, starting and ending on the G. See how that fits better? See, that fits better. Still in C major, still playing a C major scale, but I'm playing from G to G. Now, when we move to the C7 chord, we're going to modulate to a different key. The C7 is the 5th chord of the key of F, F major. So you're going to be playing F major over the C7. But again, you notice when I landed on that F, it doesn't really kind of fit with that chord. So what you want to do is play in the key of F major, play from C to C. So you're playing. It fits much better. Then we move to the D7. And the D7 is the 5 chord of the key of G. So now we will play G major scales, but we'll play it from D to D. Again, here's D7, now the G major scale. Again, you play G to G over the D7. It doesn't work too well. It catches some of the notes of the scale of the key, or catches some of the notes of the chord, but it doesn't outline the chord very well. It doesn't make the chord come out of your solo. And that's what you want to do when you're playing melodically. You want to say something melodically while at the same time sort of insinuating the chord that you're playing in. So you've got your D7. You're going to play G major, but from D to D. Sounds better, doesn't it? Then back to C7. Again, major from C to C, and then G7. Again, that's C major playing from G to G. So, that's essentially how you're going to play melodic blues. You're going to play those scale patterns over each of those chords. Again, it requires some scale knowledge, but essentially that's what you want to do. Now what I'm going to do is play a slow blues and demonstrate to you in a slow blues how you would do this and how the chords and the scales and the melodies that you'll play within those scales and how you outline those chords really works. So here we go. Play an F major over the C, back to the G, playing C major, D, which is G major, back to F, back to C major, back to G, back to C major, F, C major, a pentatonic idea. That's melodic. C major, F, back to C major, F, C major, G major, F, C major, G, and C. Well, thanks for tuning in, and again, my name is Steve. Last name is Daw, D-A-W. So hit me up on my Facebook page, like the page, and if you want some online lessons, hit me up with a message on Facebook. I'd be glad to get back with you with some details. I do lessons over Skype or iChat, whatever you prefer, and I also do billing over PayPal. So the lessons are inexpensive, $28.50 for an hour lesson. A lot of teachers are out there charging double that. So feel free to hit me up. I can get you the same information they can get you. So have fun and play in the blues until I see you next time.